So again, haven't met in a while. We're sort of waiting, well, one to take, for lack of a better term, a vacation after the last cybersecurity automation village, and the other was to sort of try and set up when the next one would be. And so, sort of one of the later points in the agenda will be to discuss that. Another point in the agenda, again, maybe after the first more technical topic, will be to discuss, hey, how when we want to meet. We probably should do that after we discuss sort of, hey, when do we think we're going to have the next village? Because that might impact how quickly, how often we meet. Um, but one of the reasons for calling this is we had been having some discussions among the various CASP groups on a particular topic that we decided that, hey, this is really a CASP topic, and the whole purpose of CASP is to get these OpenC2 roaster, cacao playbook kind of stuff going. And so I proposed to first say half the meeting be the discussion of command and control in playbooks, and then any other topics people want to talk about, and then we talk about logistics a little, save at least the last 15 minutes for what to do next based on sort of, well, one, when we think there'll be a village, and two, what everyone's thoughts are. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Lemire, who can hopefully frame, well, I'll just ask Dave, what would you like to get out of the meeting? And hopefully that will frame the discussion.
Um, I guess what I'd like to get out of it would be some sense of people's view of the path forward. Um, we have the Cacao version 2 spec, which is reasonably complete, readable. But as an OpenC2 person, I look at it and say, this isn't terribly well connected with where OpenC2 is today. We have the Cacao roaster, which is an active project moving forward. Nice tool to have, still has the number of improvements that it needs. We have Sorka coming along, which is evolving its cacao-oriented capabilities. They started out at a fairly straightforward kind of let's get a couple of fundamentals in here and get things going kind of level as best I read it. They have had another release since then, which has added some additional capability. So it's kind of where is everyone at and what do they envision as the path forward, and how does that path forward support better connection among these things? So from the OpenC2 perspective, we have initiated a new work item we call the OpenC2 extension for Cacao. This is a specification being developed by the OpenC2 TC as one of our own work products, although we would hope that eventually the work would be merged into Cacao at some point and become part of the Cacao specification and not just an adjunct to it. Then it hopefully captures, more OpenC2 flavored integration of the two capabilities, for lack of a better word. I'm going to put a couple links in the chat. The first one is the working draft of, if I can find the chat, there's the chat. The current working draft of that specification as things stand today. And then the other link is the one open pull request that's been developed since all of the other ones were integrated in. So these links, when you get a chance to take a look, will give you a sense of where the OpenC2 TC is with regard to this. Basically, they address first our concern that Cacao defined its command object as OpenC2-HTTP, which is binding OpenC2 to a transfer protocol, which is explicitly one of the things OpenC2 as a language definition has tried not to do. We've been more modular than that in that we have the language, we have transfer specifications, and they are independent things with the goal that OpenC2 commands can be defined in a transfer independent way. So the top level flavor of this extension specification, we define an OpenC2 command object that is similar to the one that's in the Cacao spec, but eliminates the HTTP connection. We define transfer agents for MQTT broker as a generic capability, and OpenC2 HTTP as an extension of the Cacao HTTP API that incorporates the things that are peculiar to the way OpenC2 uses HTTPS for transfer. And we defined some standard variables for interfacing between OpenC2 command action steps and those agents in order to leverage the transfer protocols. There's also some content in there that addresses having Cacao targets that correspond to OpenC2 actuator profiles. And quite frankly, I've drafted that material up to make it available for discussion. It's not 100% clear to me that it's actually useful. But I need people who understand the philosophy and approach and future of Cacao better than I do to take a look at that material and say, yes, we should keep this, evolve it in this direction, or no, it really doesn't add anything useful. We should take it back. So that'd be my summary of where I'd like the discussions to move over time and where we are starting input to that discussion.
So Dave, I could ask some clarifying questions. You gave a very good summary of sort of where OpenC2 and Cacao are at from a command and control viewpoint. That the original Cacao OpenC2 was, many years ago, and OpenC2 has sort of evolved since then. And so you're proposing some changes to make it work well together. Do you happen to know, or does anyone else on the call, if they'd be better to answer the equivalent sort of command and control aspects of either Sorka or Roaster?
Well, Roaster is a tool for developing playbooks.
Right.
So
it's just a GUI tool for them. So Roaster is just it enables you to, create graphical representations of the playbooks or to generate the playbooks from a graphical interface. And then what we learned from doing that is that we actually do need the layout information in the playbook because some people want to be able to share the pretty picture. And so that will get put into 2.1.
So Roaster is, from a command and control viewpoint, for lack of a better term, I'll say on the old OpenC2, does it have other command and control other than OpenC2? I assume it does.
Yeah, so it supports all the ones that are available in Cacao, which would be everything from a human manual command to normal HTTP API commands to shell commands to OpenC2 to Jupyter notebooks and Yara and Sigma and all that kind of crap. So
are all of the other things other than OpenC2, the commands are tied to the transfer, or do any of the other ones have a similar to OpenC2 that the command has multiple ways to transfer it and they're independent of each other?
Well, so it's not that, so Cacao doesn't define an actual transport. When we were writing the OpenC2 pieces, the only one we knew of was the HTTP. And so
that's what we did first, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why it was called that. So for example, you can do an SSH command, but we don't actually we define what the SSH agent or target would look like and what the parameters and username and password or credentials you need to talk to it, and the IP address or whatever. But that's the extent of it, right? So you would have to have logic that knows how to talk to SSH in order to implement that. So for OpenC2, you would have to know, like, oh, is this MQTT or whatever? But when we put that vocabulary entry in, we didn't know all the other stuff. And we asked for help, but nobody came from the OpenC2 community to guide us in a better path. So we could fix that. And if we're going to fix it, we should do it in this next 2.1 that we're going to do. And I'm an advocate, a very strong advocate for harmonization of all of these pieces. Now that we have enough of them done in silos, we need to figure out how we harmonize them. And whatever we can do to make that happen would be fantastic.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for this group is because we have all these silos, and this is sort of where we can have these kind of discussions to how to harmonize them. I think we generally have everybody wishes everybody went to everybody's meetings, but nobody wants to go to all the meetings. So that is one of the issues. What about Sorka? Do we know anything on its OpenC2 to and or other command and control.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Luca Morgese from TNO, one of the Sorca developers and TC member in Cacao. At the moment, we have implemented support for OpenC2, HTTP, and SSH. So this is the command and control type of commands that we can execute at the moment in Sorca. Plans for the foreseeable future are to implement all possible commands that are now in Cacao, but yeah, it's gonna take a bit, but at the moment is these three.
And that's pretty common with the other vendors that I've talked to that have products that are coming online. Not Sidearm. Sidearm did an early implementation of Cacao. They need to update their version to the latest. But there's a couple other vendors that are implementing it, and they're taking a very similar stance. They're either doing the HTTP API and SSH, or a couple of those. Obviously, the manual command, because everybody does manual stuff. But Duncan, to your point, one thing that might be really helpful on one of these calls is, from the Cacao standpoint, is if I gave a very detailed explanation of how action steps work and how the commands are encapsulated, and actually just kind of show it and show a couple examples. And then if we could do the same thing with OpenC2, because I was involved in OpenC2 in the very early days and spent a lot of time there, but I haven't touched it in a long time. And so I'm not quite sure how I could help bring stuff together. And
Yeah, one of the hopes would be to get you guys happen to be three in a row on my screen at the moment, but the three of, the Sorca Cacao and OpenC2 and ideally a roaster to boot, talking details of this. Because Dave, at least from the OpenC2 viewpoint, we want to get in the OpenC2 spec, get the Cacao right, because we have this issue of there are two distinct communities at the moment that I used to be the main overlap, and I'm trying to not go to as many meetings. And so we want to get it. We did have a discussion with CTI, and the decision was to not do it in CTI. It had to be done elsewhere. So we said, all right, we'll do it in OpenC2, and then sort of follow the threat actor and other sort of groups that are saying, hey, yeah, we'll do the work with the community that cares, that has the knowledge, that cares about it, and then bring it back to CTI. So we're sort of just following that model.
Yeah,
I realize it's CTI versus Cacao, but we sort of I meant the Cacao group when I said it the first time, but the sort of which group to do it in it wasn't happening in the other one, so we did it. We're happy to move it. The problem is the people won't be there, so that's why we have.
So just a point of clarification, Duncan. So Luca is incredibly active in Cacao, and we're implementing a lot of things based on their feedback and all the stuff that they're doing. Like Luca's incredibly active and knows Cacao inside and out. Mateus and Vasilios, who wrote the Rooster, are also incredibly active in Cacao and know it intimately. So that communication is happening because it's happening all the time. What we need to figure out is how do we connect, in my opinion, how do we get a better connection with OpenC2? And in all honesty, how do we get a better connection with indicators of behavior and some of these other things so that we can kind of harmonize this side of it? Connection with CTI, like we designed Cacao to plug right into the graph, but CTI is a mess right now. And so it'll be interesting to see like how we can eventually harmonize there. But I think if we can harmonize in this group first, it'll make it easier to go back. So
yep. Well, and I'm all for doing that, but I can't tell people to go to meetings. And so DoD/NSA, I mean, what you're basically saying, hey, Dave, Mike, Dave, three of you from NSA, you need to show up at Cacao.
No, I'm not saying that.
Afford to do that.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying in this meeting,
okay,
we should have a discussion, a really detailed, like how.
That's what we want to do. That's we want to start that right now. That's the first. We still only have 10 minutes left of it, but that's what we want. We want to get going on how to do that. So we could, if you want, set up the next one of these to be a deeper dive that everyone comes better prepared for. And we send some emails ahead of time with, hey, here's like Dave's links on, here's where OpenC2 is at, here's where Cacao's at, here's where Sorka's at, here's the issue with, because again, because bigger picture, taking off my OpenC2 hat and putting on my CASP hat, we want to solve the cybersecurity automation issue. To do that, we have to get to the connection between the threat and you do something about it. And the hope is that OpenC2 is one of, and hopefully eventually a more common way to do the command and control. So you can trade, you don't make a playbook that's very specific to the implementation. You make a playbook that anyone else could use because it is less implementation dependent. That's the hope. Whether we can achieve it or not, I don't know.
So that is the fundamental design that we have in Cacao today, right? With all the playbooks. So that you would tie it to a campaign or intrusion set or threat actor activity, and it answers the therefore now what of threat intelligence. And then from a command standpoint, like you have action, or you have agents that execute commands against targets. And so we've just defined a few of the very common commands that people would want, or the ones that people told us.
Yeah.
And what I think
I get it.
How do we get OpenC2 better in there?
Yeah, no, I mean, the world today is a balkanized world. The security is, you buy this vendor and talk to it this way. You buy this other vendor, you talk to it that way. You use, Python to do this. You use, SSH to do that. That's just how the world works today. The OpenC2 objective is to try and get that up a layer. We have been unsuccessful at that to date. But part of it is because we need this tie-in. We basically needed Cacao for it to make any sense. And so that's where I believe the OpenC2 proponents are coming from. So yeah, so we could set up, if we don't want to get into more detail here, we could basically take it as a homework assignment, given what given what Dave presented as his links, and then maybe next meeting get into more the, hey, are we doing it right? And if we are doing it right, should it stay in OpenC2 or should it move to Cacao, or should we be doing it here, or all of the above? Kevin.
Hey there, just wanted to take a brief mention since I've taken a look at some of what Mr. Lemire has written. I do think that it'll align nicely with Mr. Jordan's objective of getting these things integrated with Cacao, with treating this as along the lines of an open vocabulary and extending existing Cacao structures with agents there. So I think taking a look will be a good first step.
Good. All right. Do we want to start, say, in the next 10, 15 minutes, so not a lot of time, but do we want to spend a little bit of time going over any of Dave's stuff now just to show it? I assume Dave has read Cacao, so knows it at least a little bit, but as he said, he's not an expert, so he's probably made, he's worried he's made mistakes. I'll put it that way. Do we want to go into it a little more? We got a Zoom, we can pop up screens and stuff, or do we want to kick that to the next meeting? What's people's preference?
Dave, would you be ready to do an impromptu walkthrough, or would you prefer to wait?
I can do an impromptu walkthrough. I need about 2 minutes to take care of one other item of business. I have another call at 11 that I will absolutely have to jump to. And I need to send one prep email for that, but I can pick up in about 2 minutes.
All right, so we will talk another topic for 2 minutes and then come back to you and do that. So one other topic, a major topic, is to sort of, do we want to have another village? At the conclusion of the previous village, the answer seemed to be a resounding yes. We talked at the time about fall being the sort of, hey, it would be nice if we could get back on the 2-a-year schedule, which we were on, I think, for only one of our 5 years of doing them. But we did do it once. But then COVID hit and all that other, we went slow for a while. And we did have a potential volunteer, but before we get into the village volunteer discussion, I'd say there's probably 2 new additions maybe to CASP as a whole. One is OSIM, which is, the supply chain information modeling. But the other is, as part of OCA now has another project on interoperability village, which is very closely tied to the to the CASP mission. So I believe that has kicked off and we're actually doing stuff there, but I'm not 100% sure. So Patrick, could you answer both the interoperability village status and the, hey, is AT&T going to host the next, I'm sorry, yeah, interoperability status, and is AT&T going to host the next village status? Can I put you on the spot for that for a minute or two?
Absolutely, sir. The interoperability village project, I have finally achieved the approvals up to Jeremy Legg to actually go into the GitHub repo and create, submit content, and execute the ECLA and individual CLA. So that roadblock has been removed. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a lot to get here. The second part is I've been drafted into something. I'm actually in Nashville today for my final training class. So I've actually been completely tied up nonstop, completing 57 classes I had to complete for AT&T to become a certified fiber optic telephone installation person for AT&T should they need us in the event of a labor strike.
Good old strike duty.
Yep. So I'm here today to climb telephone poles, go down in manholes, and I guess hang ladders up on power lines. I don't know. Anyway, so I do hope to be able to dedicate some time both to getting, right now the website, the GitHub repo is just a bare skeleton. So that's going to be the first part of this. But the most important thing is securing a sponsor. I had a very good conversation yesterday with a former startup CEO that also works closely with AWS, and he is in fact meeting with a senior level person at AWS. So we're taking another run at getting AWS to donate the real estate for the island. Right? We can't start building huts in the village in the fire pit until we have some real estate. So. Until I get that, this thing's kind of dead in the water. I've considered maybe putting up some personal money, but have every time I think about doing that, I reconsider. So, getting the funding established is absolutely critical. But in the meantime, I'm going to try to get the content up on the GitHub repo such that there is a place to send people to and to start organizing processes and procedures on the assumption that we are going to get some funding. I've also, I don't want to get into it here. So I have some thoughts on maybe some approaches we could take, but for right now,
I guess one question. So again, we don't want to have an interoperability vision meeting here. We just want to get the high picture. But now that you're in the state that you're in, are you going to call a meeting of that group at some point?
I am.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
So we can get into it in more detail there, and then that can feed this group. So
I'm done. I said my piece, Duncan. So,
well, one more question though. The second part of the question is, what about the hosting the village? AT&T was hosting.
Right. That was my next point, sir.
Go ahead on that one. Is that what's status on that?
Yeah. Okay. So I've not made any inroads with the facility down in Washington, D.C. I am still trying to. I did get from Dan Solero some information, but so yes, I still want to do it either at Washington, D.C. if I can get that approved, and if not, up in Middletown if I can get it approved up in Middletown. The only problem with Middletown is the rooms we have are not really well laid out for connectivity, etc. So that would be my second choice. So I am still actively pursuing both those options.
And are we still thinking September, October timeframe? Is that September is getting awful tight at this point? So is October a possibility, or what were you thinking timeframe wise?
We originally said fall, but like you said, we're not. We're going to be in August before we blink our eyes here. So
right, that's my worry.
Right, and there's also issues about other things to schedule around, etc. So
right.
I don't have a specific target objective. I have a specific objective to secure the space, and I'm assuming we want to go for 3 days. 2.5, 3 days?
Well, that's another thing worthy of topic. Maybe after Dave, we can talk about it some more, but two
Okay.
is
Yeah,
what we
we
did
don't need
last
to.
time. Some people wanted 3. We'll have to decide 2 or 3, but the host gets a big say in that. So that's partly up to
Right.
you, because 3 is
Yeah,
obviously harder to get than 2.
well, no, well, actually, I think the space is harder to get, but yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's a calendar, so things run into each other. So,
No, that's right. That's right. So yeah, my thinking was just sticking with shooting for a 3 day, and if we end up doing a 2.5 day to the bookend, people getting in and out to airports, and of course, what if it's in Washington D.C. or Middletown, that'll be a different calculation. So I'm actively working it and trying to find the doors to knock on and knock them down. Over.
appreciate it. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it now. Dave obviously is ready to present because he's sharing his screen. We'll turn it back to Dave.
Okay. So here's the table of contents for what we've got. The introduction's just kind of general stuff. We talked through some concepts, in particular where OpenC2 and Cacao have overlapping terminology, such as producer, consumer, target, to try to clarify how those things are used in each of the 2 contexts. And one of the things I need to do with the draft is make sure that it's carefully labeling those terms where they are used with their appropriate context so that it is clear. Cacao makes a lot of use of vocabularies in order to standardize language, and they draw a distinction between enumerations, which are fixed, and open vocabularies, which are extensible. And so there's a number of points here where I've taken the option of defining an additional term for an open vocabulary that I think is, the better connection to OpenC2. From there, we then get into the command objects. I take the basic Cacao OpenC2 HTTP object as a starting point, and then do some adjustments to that, including where we apply the changed open vocabulary terms. I have a discussion. Cacao does a lot of base 64 encoding of commands in order to preserve their content as they're moved about. So, excuse me. When you work in Cacao Roaster, you can see the source code of your command. In the case of OpenC2, for example, the JSON. But when it's stored in a base 64 encoded form. So I take a stab at discussing how encoding works, where decoding happens, how it interplays with the message transfer. I have a placeholder right now for a section. Cacao has what they call a playbook action step, which is used to call another playbook. I have a placeholder for discussion of how you would invoke OpenC2 in a subordinate playbook like that, but I haven't fleshed it out at all yet. Then I move on to the agents and targets. So I define a broker agent and an HTTP agent. The broker agent is actually general purpose. It is not specific to OpenC2, but I do discuss how we connect to the OpenC2 MQTT transfer spec if you're using an MQTT broker. But it seems to me if we're introducing, a particular agent type, there's no reason to limit it to OpenC2 as an application.
So Dave, I interrupt you for a point here just to ask the others who know Cacao better. So is MQTT used in anything else in Cacao or any other MQTT, any other Cacao actions based on MQTT?
No, we don't touch the transport protocol. It's completely agnostic. It's left up to the actual implementation. So we call out the IP address or the URL that you're going to go to. And then if it's ones that are in the list like SSH, then obviously you need to do SSH, connection.
Well, I mean, that is a transport protocol. So, okay, but yeah.
Yeah, but we don't define, we just say that it's SSH, right? So in this case, I think this would work well. We would just define MQTT or AMQP, or whatever, it's
Okay.
rather
I
than.
was asking to make sure we didn't conflict with anything. So but there's nothing there to conflict with. So
Nope.
okay.
Yeah, I'll also note that I did look over the material that Sorka had put online, and the approach I'm describing here that's in the specification is pretty parallel to what I saw in some of their example playbooks that showed OpenC2 stuff. So I think
Okay.
the basic concepts have appeared in more than one place, which is usually a good indicator in my mind.
Yeah, and the reason everything's base 64 encoded, or most things are base 64 encoded, is to handle the quoted aspect that exists inside of commands. And then some commands like Yara are very specific with spacing and stuff like that. So
So then I define a couple of, prearranged, I guess you'd call them, playbook variables for passing topics to an MQTT agent or endpoints to an HTTP API in order to send that material. So if I jump ahead, here's kind of an example of how it looks. The spec is in OpenC2 style, not Cacao style, just for clarity's sake. The Cacao spec has a particular look that we did not attempt to emulate here.
yeah, it looks like
So-
sticks.
Yeah, it also looks like OpenC2 because we're using just basic GitHub flavored Markdown for creating our content. And I had meant to jump to here.
No, I meant Cacao looks like sticks because
Right.
I wrote both. So
Yeah. So here's an example of working those details in, right? We talk about the OpenC2 command and define it as an extension to the command type open vocabulary. I then go into the object, which is very, very similar to the OpenC2 HTTP object. It does call out the use of Cacao step variables explicitly as a way of connecting from the action step to the agent. So we use the step variables to then invoke the appropriate variables for connecting to the broker or the HTTP API.
can I stop you right there?
Sure.
So because of the stuff Luca's doing, we actually need to define variables at the scope of the command. Because Luca discovered that, when you have multiple commands in a step, you don't know which ones are getting the variables and which ones are returning the variables. So I think we can solve all of this here. Like everything I see here so far is like this could be really easily implemented.
Okay. That's
So
good to hear.
I have a question on the step variables, but not the step first command variables. When you say the agent must be one of MQTT broker, HTTP API, that's for meeting the current OpenC2 specification. But there's a lot of actual Cacao playbooks. Like when you look at the actual examples people have of doing this one in Python and this one in SSH and this one in this other stuff. They are, for lack of a better term, similar to OpenC2. Is it possible to use, for lack of a better term, mix and match these, to use OpenC2 to be the higher level abstraction of lower level SSH or Python or other stuff commands? Did that even make any sense? It might not.
In OpenC2 or in Cacao?
Well, here's my thought. You have, somebody does something in their existing network, they have stuff, they do it very, for lack of a term, I'm gonna call it implementation dependent. They do this with an SSH command because that's how they do it. And this other company does this other thing with Python because that's how they do it. And the hope would be in the long run, there could be an OpenC2 command that was an abstraction above both of them because they're doing the same thing. They just chose different ways to do it. They're both doing a, stop this IP from going through the firewall.
So yeah, that's supported today, right? And that was why we designed
When you say that was supported today, what's supported today?
the ability to have OpenC2 be an abstraction layer. So if OpenC2 becomes successful and gets widely adopted, then it would be very easy just to have the primary command that most people use, other than maybe the human command, would just be an OpenC2 command.
And I was wondering about sort of the connection, particularly because, you know, we have a large embedded base already out there that isn't that way of the, right now it's an OpenC2 command, but since the down or this instant today, I make an OpenC2 command, but the implementation at the other end doesn't support the OpenC2. So in the playbook, I put OpenC2, but I also put that this means send this SSH or send this Python or send this whatever. Is that doable? That's what I'm asking is if that's
Yeah,
doable.
so obviously we would need to look at that specifically, but I think what you would do is you would define the command as an SSH command and you would send it to an OpenC2 agent.
No, I want to do it the other way around. I want the playbook to be OpenC2, but the implementation to actually use SSH because we include in the playbook the, hey, and for this guy, do it this way.
So like we need to like sit in front of a virtual whiteboard or like we need to like diagram and dry this out because I think everything is doable. We just need to, I just need to understand exactly what this means.
All right. All right, back to Dave. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. So then I provide an example each of how this looks if you're using an MQTT agent or an HTTP endpoint to send the command using the exact same command that was already defined in the Cacao spec. Then the discussion of where base64 encoding and decoding would be handled, which is right. And it basically says that the Cacao producer, the thing that creates a playbook, would store that command in a base64 encoded form. That's the form where it would be passed to the agent, and it would be the agent's job to handle the decoding for base64 in order to send out over the chosen transfer mechanism, and then deal with responses that come back. And handling responses is one of the things that's still very much work in progress in this document right now.
Yes, I think you're 100% right. That's so if you have an implementation like a product that is consuming a threat feed that has playbooks and you want to execute it, then the command is going to go to an agent and you're going to, if it's an OpenC2 agent, then you're going to have to write some sort of module code to take the data from the Cacao playbook and process it into whatever OpenC2 code you have. And so there's going to be that little shim layer, but you would have the same thing for SSH or HTTP APIs or whatever, right? So you will have that tiny bit of code that will do that little bit of bringing stuff in from the playbook and then firing it across. And so, so I think you're right. Like, and I think all of this is very doable. I don't really see a ton of changes we need in Cacao. I mean, because like we should make all of these suggestions in the Cacao spec. And so that Cacao just natively does this because we shouldn't release a separate specification because that's just going to make it even further removed from adoption.
Given the conversation that happened when I posted questions and issues in the Cacao repo, creating a work product seemed to us the best way to go about capturing specifics that could be considered.
Yep, that's 100. Yeah, that's great. Fantastic.
So,
I don't understand it. And so having something like this and having a discussion helps me understand. And then we can say, okay, like what changes do we actually need? And then let's just make those changes.
fair enough. And Duncan, cut me off when you feel the need to for time reasons.
I'll give you, how about I give you another 3 minutes?
Fair enough. As I noted, I have an 11 o'clock meeting, but Kevin is also on my team and he can.
Yeah, but
he
the
can
meeting's
stay
only
longer.
scheduled till 11, so lots of us have 11 o'clock meetings. So we will wrap up by at least a minute or two before 11.
Okay.
Because we already covered some of the topic that comes after this when we, while you were setting up and talked with Patrick. But we still have to, the main topic left now is, hey, when do we want to meet again? So that's what we'll do I'll give you another 3 minutes starting now.
Okay. So the next section discusses agents and targets. As I mentioned, we define a general purpose broker agent as a way to speak to things. That agent needs to be passed an address, optionally authentication information, and then we specifically call out the use of a predefined variable as a mechanism to say, what topics do you actually send this traffic on?
And I think
So-
what I would do is I would just add another property to that agent that would
Mhm.
be the topic or topics as a list of strings. And then you could just use the normal variables that you would use in Kakao, and people could just send that right in. So I think all of this is doable.
Okay. One of the challenges in trying to think through how all of this works is that the Kakao specification defines the concept of variables, but doesn't say a lot about how you use them, especially how you set values to them. It does say how you read values out of them. There need to be more specifics on that particular, in my opinion.
Cool. That's great feedback. Maybe we can work on fixing that or adding more detail.
Yeah.
Right. Similar approach with the HTTP AI agent. Not hugely different there. And then, as I mentioned, I defined a target that corresponds to an actuator profile. I'm on the fence personally as to whether this is actually a useful concept in this context, and I think this is an area where there can be some good discussion had as to, does this help anyone building a playbook or building a playbook execution engine?
So Dave, interrupting you on that one, my sort of standard test on answering those kind of questions is to play them into the CASP use cases and see if in the for lack of a term, again, tabletop, but in an actual exercise, does it what value does it add, or did it get in the way, or did we need it, or whatever? So I think that is the type of thing this group could help with answering that by we spend a little time actually walking through any one of the exercises we already have, as far as, oh, that means you got to send this command, you got this answer back, so send this command. Oh, wait a second, I got a device manager and 3 firewalls. How do I know which one to send to? Oh, this helps with that. Or, oh no, that just made it more complicated, whichever the answer.
Right.
Back to you.
Yep. And then, as I mentioned, we define variables to use to aid that interface from the action step to the agent, to present either MQTT topics to an MQTT agent or endpoints to an HTTP agent. And so that's pretty much where the draft stands right now. Using my last minute very quickly, also defined a responses variable. The structure of this looks somewhat similar. The purpose of this, sorry, down here. The purpose of this is when the agent gets a reply back, particularly like, well, either with an MQTT or an HTTP agent, you may get responses back from OpenC2 consumers. How do we package those responses up and return them to the action step that triggered all of this? And the point here is, if there's conditional logic in the playbook, that conditional logic may care what these responses are in order to determine what happens next. So this was a mechanism for getting that back.
Yeah, so we have a concept called, in args, the stuff that goes in to a function or to an agent, whatever, and then the out args are the things that come back. But as Luca pointed out, we need to do a few things, make a few tweaks there. So as we make these changes, we want to really work closely with you so that we can accommodate these use cases as well. So
Brett, has Kakao handled in the past? Let me back up before I ask the question. So OpenC2 has had to struggle over the years with the concept of you're talking to one thing or you're talking to one thing that's controlling many things. So the difference between I'm talking to the firewall or I'm talking to a device manager that's controlling 5 firewalls are different use cases. And there's one particular hang up that we have run into a lot is when you are doing the device manager case and you're talking to 5 firewalls and 3 of them answered and 2 of them didn't, is one of the things you have to handle. Have you guys dealt with that kind of stuff before?
So we had to address that when we started doing attack simulation, because, you know, if you talk to, you know, for hypothetically a Kali Linux installation and it's going to go off and do stuff, but obviously you're going to talk to something much more advanced than the Kali Linux. But it was just the example we talked about. You're going to have that. And so we had to address and solve for that. But as far as the nature of which things respond, that's going to be in that little bit of code that's going to be at the agent level that's going to process that and understand that logic. So we're going to get the in-args and out-args figured out for the commands, which should help a lot of that. But we did already have to solve that because we had a requirement to do attack simulation in Cacao. So, and if that, then you have to basically send a command to one thing and it's going to do a bunch of stuff.
Okay, thanks. All right, so with that, let's switch topics and devote the last few minutes to when we're going to meet next. So we sort of have a bigger objective of we are going to have another village. We're still shooting for fall, probably not early September, probably either late September, October, maybe later, depending on we get it. We have one potential host working it at the moment. If any other potential hosts pop up, please speak up. So sort of given that time frame, given the work we want to do on this, do we want to meet monthly, bi-weekly? I'm against weekly. That's just too often. But once a month, twice a month between for now, and then if once we get to picking a village and an actual date, we'll probably go to weekly nearer to it. But for now, because it is summer, when do we want to meet next? 2 weeks from now or a month from now? Brett,
Just once a month.
once a month. Okay. Monthly. John said once a month. Any proponents for more than once a month? And it's a totally unfair question because this particular meeting was picked by obviously who could make this particular meeting. But at least for this particular meeting is the whatever Friday in the month. This is the second Friday. This must be the second Friday. It's the second Friday in the month at 10 a.m. Eastern. Is that as good a time as any?
Works great for me, sir.
All right, then we will go with the second Friday in August at 10 a.m. is the next meeting. Jane, can I stick with you with getting that on the calendar? Because I somehow messed up getting this on the calendar and had to get help. So,
Yeah, I'll get it.
I think my permissions are still wacky or something. One other point before so that's good. So we're set for that one. We'll assume that'll be a standing meeting going after that, but we can always, throw in more if it works out necessary. One just sort of random, sort of related comment. So OSIM started up. It is a new TC. Cacao's an existing TC. OpenC2 is an existing TC. Indicators of Behavior is another OCA project, just like CASP. Those two systems, the sort of OCA and open project systems and the TC systems, use different email lists. There's no problem with this particular CASP list that I know of, but just to make everybody aware of an issue with the TC mailing list. Now that they've switched over to the Oasis switched over to a new system. Some people have discovered it was a big issue in OSIM because it was an all new technical committee that the new system defaults to not sending you email. Okay. And that you have to go in and say you want to change, don't send me email, to either send it immediately or send a digest once daily. And it's not obvious how to change that. In other words, if you go to, I'm going to use OpenC2 as an example. If you go to the OpenC2 TC and click on your email preferences, it gives you the drop down and you can try and change it till the cows come home. It won't change. The only way you can change it is to click on your picture up in the corner, go into your overall profile and change both your email preferences and your what they call, it's not connection, some other word preferences that are the actual where you'll get this big long list of all the things you're in and you can change it. So again, does not affect the CASP mailing list, but does affect many of the projects that are part of CASP. And once you look at that overall list, so far, almost everybody I know who's done it has discovered things they didn't realize. Like, oh, I didn't realize I wasn't getting the Cacao email list. I was just getting the CTI and OpenC2 ones, stuff like that. So just to make people aware of that, since it's been a big issue in OSIM, because everybody was defaulted to not get any emails. So we sort of noticed nobody was getting them. But that sort of uncovered the problem that other people are not getting emails they thought they probably shouldn't be getting. Again, you can consciously decide to not get them. That's fine. Patrick has his hand up. Patrick.
So I have a quick question that you might be able to answer.
Sure.
So I do have the GitHub repo set up for the Interoperability Village, but there's other stuff that needs to be set up. Do I continue to work that through Claudia? For example, the main website and then a landing page and then getting the actual project added to it. Who do I work that with?
I'll say I think so, but Brett, do you know if I know there are staff changes going on in Oasis, so I'm not intimately familiar with them. To my knowledge, OCA is still Claudia.
Okay, I'll work with her. Thank you.
So, okay, so that's why I'm not getting any OSIM messages or emails, or
Correct.
don't know about anything going on in OSIM because
Yeah, in fact, if you go to if you go through the new, Higher Logic webpage to the OSIM main page and then click on the web page to look at emails, you'll find an email saying, "Hey, everybody who got this, reply to me. I did notice you are one of the ones who has not replied to me yet." So
yeah,
owe
well, it's
you an
because I'm
email.
not getting it. So
Well, I know that's the point. The reason I did it was to find out who wouldn't reply, so I could then individually send them emails to say, "Hey, by the way, maybe you don't want the emails. That's okay. You're allowed to set it to no email. But in case you wanted them, here's how to get at changing them." So why I'm alerting people through every mechanism I can. And like I said, people discovered other TCs that had the issue. OSIM has it because basically everybody got hit wrong with it. But other TVs, just people didn't realize they were set that way. Any other topics before we go?
Duncan, I put in a link, a pretty
Sure.
cool article you could take a look at. This came out of CISA yesterday, and it was a red team experience where CISA actually attacked a existing agency and found some very interesting things. So I think maybe for the next village, this could be a sample or example of different actions and maybe target what this group does from an automation solution that was not done in this example.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And other work that we're doing. So we're not, I really enjoy learning from this group because this is threat hunting is another area that we will eventually get to. We're more on the proactive side of just getting assets identified and vulnerabilities measured and impacts to operations. Whereas this group is automating, how do we remediate, right? So, did you consider talking with CISA about maybe hosting a village?
Yes.
And okay,
And no.
they're not going to do it.
No.
Okay.
It's too well, we could always ask again, but it's too challenging, I guess is the answer.
Okay. So we're doing it with the
It might
SBOM
change
team.
after SBOM-Arama. Now for the first
Right.
time ever, they are having the vendor showcase at SBOM-Arama in
Exactly.
by the way, I should just mention to everybody on CASP, since obviously the supply chain use cases are use cases we also care about in CASP. There will be a sort of like a supply chain village at the there's going to be a vendor showcase at the SBOM-Arama that CISA is hosting in Denver in September. So if people aren't aware of that, they might want to look into that. So to answer your question, John, now that CISA has solved how to have that village after that village,
That's right.
solved it. We could re-ask the question, but at least historically, it has been easier for us to host them and let them participate than have them host them because they get all sorts of constraints on them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
yeah, and so just to clarify, so Cacao doesn't do just remediation; it can also do detection and those sort of pieces. So all of those things are very valid for Cacao as well.
Yeah, John, the supply chain stuff all plays into CASP and Cacao. It's just this meeting was focused on the command and control, which tends to be after something's happened. But it also command and control works for the, hey, go get me an SBOM, go compare it to your CVEs. Hey, because of that, bump your higher priority and go patch this device. That can all be in playbooks with OpenC2 commands as well. In fact, it's in one of the CASP use cases, that exact use case.
Duncan, it's Steve Relitz.
Oh, hi, Steve.
I've already been told by my leadership that we're willing to host another village within the next 12 months. So if Patrick does the fall one, we could do a spring round for the next iteration if we're meeting twice a year. If we're meeting quarterly, we can.
Bang, you're up next after Patrick. And if Patrick falls through, you're up next. So great. Well, thank you for volunteering.
Roger that.
And that will make it into the meeting notes. So we'll hold you to it. No, we appreciate the offer. Anything else before we break? Great. Well, we'll give everyone 1 minute for a bio break before they run to their 11 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. It was a very productive meeting. We'll talk to you all in a month. And don't forget the email list and send stuff via email in the meantime. Over.